Podcasting from beautiful Leesburg, Virginia. Welcome to the Music Educator podcast, bringing you tips, tricks, and practical advice that you can use tomorrow. Here's your host and fellow music educator, Bill Stevens.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Music Educator podcast. My name is Bill Stevens. I'll be your host today, and we are celebrating and airing Season 3, Episode 5 of the podcast, entitled Choosing a Method Book. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that my heart goes out to those that have been affected by COVID-19. It's been really tough. Many people have passed away, and keeping our children safe is definitely a tough task to do, especially if you're in one of those school systems where you actually have to go into the schools. That's not easy. So kudos to you. Keep it strong. Use your support network. We're here for you. In my particular school system, we have been going virtual for about a month with students, and there have certainly been challenges. We do not operate every single day. We actually do a teacher day and planning and training on Mondays, and then from basically 8 to about 4 p.m., we'll do classes, we'll do office hours, we'll do all sorts of things, synchronous and asynchronous. And I'm actually curious what everybody actually is doing. And if you get a chance, please comment on the podcast because we'd love to hear what's going on with you. But like normal, business happens, and we're going to go ahead and continue with tips, tricks, and advice for the 21st century music educator. So today we're going to talk a little bit about choosing a method book. Let's begin. Choosing a method book can be an arduous task for many young band directors. There are several strategic elements that you will need included in your method book of choice. More importantly, the selection process will require you, as the music educator, to prioritize what is important for your students to learn. Thoughtful selection. Factors that should be included in this thoughtful selection cover logical sequence of curriculum-based content, appropriate amount of repetition to reinforce new concepts, appropriate pacing of material, considers the logical range requirements of the French horn, provides supplemental materials such as online tracks, warm-up materials, chorales, etc. One to rule them all? Unfortunately, there has yet to be a perfect method book for band. This is why doing your research to see what each book has to offer is so important. And I personally use Sound Innovations for Band with my beginning band students. However, the middle school band director down the street, he lives by the essential elements. We all teach the common core concepts. However, our nurturing instincts lead us to facilitate learning in slightly different ways. These preferences are influenced by our past observations from our mentors and influencers as we developed as music educators. However, there are certain consistencies within my colleagues' philosophies. For instance, we all use a method book with our beginning band students, and we always include some sort of supplemental material to enhance our musical instruction. So let's talk about supplemental instruction. Supplemental materials and instruction should fill in the gaps where a method book leaves off. When deciding what supplemental material to include, consider the skills and concepts a particular book does not cover. You can easily compare the book's contents to a school division's curriculum guide or the state standards for instrumental music education. Also consider if the skills and concepts not taught in the book could be easily taught with supplemental materials. Supplemental materials should be prioritized and utilized strategically. If the act of using supplements is too time-consuming and detracts from other critical skill learning, then perhaps you should reconsider your plan of attack. Supplemental materials may be needed if a method book does not begin strategic learning on beginner-friendly notes. One such instrument, the French horn, often finds itself playing notes that are higher or lower than comfortable. And this is because of where the French horn lies on the overtone series, and where the majority of the other band instruments often start learning their first notes. Since many method books have players playing unison concert pitches, the French horn players often get the short end of the stick. As a result, the players end up playing notes that are often too high or too low for comfort. In addition, consider what rhythmic patterns the student begins learning on. Personally, I feel comfortable teaching students based on a pulse system first. This means exposing students to quarter notes early is important for me rather than introducing whole notes first. If I had a choice in a method book that introduced rhythms using this philosophy, I would certainly consider using it. However, this certainly is not always the case. And as a result, I may consider using programs such as Sight Reading Factory or Smart Music that will allow me to customize rhythm reading with my students. Connecting key concepts. Once you have decided on a band method book that works for you, start to connect which skills appropriately cater towards your curriculum calendar. This means manually going through the book and literally listing the specific skills that hit specific key concepts. If you did your homework well, you would have noticed that some method books have already created charts in their teacher version editions. Accept the fact that it is okay to skip around in a method book, and remember you are catering to your students as learners, not to check off empty boxes the method book has provided you. Experiment. Finally, don't be afraid to experiment. This can be interpreted in a number of different ways. First, take an example in the method book that involves a series of repeating eighth notes. Have your students play that to the best of their ability. Practice if needed. Then, when appropriate, use that same piece to introduce basic swing style. Remember, as teachers, we want to be able to teach a concept in 300 different ways. Sometimes to teach a concept or a musical interpretation, we sometimes have to teach our students what it is not. Another way to experiment is to change which method book you use. Now, I wouldn't recommend changing midstream. However, if you have used one book for 6 years, don't be afraid to try a new one the upcoming year. Not only may you find a better book for instruction, but you might be able to get a break from the mundane routine of the old book. Conclusion. In conclusion, it is important to select a method book wisely for your music instruction. Consider what musical concepts are most important when making this selection. Now understand that no one book is perfect, and it is important to use supplemental materials to fill in the curriculum gaps. These materials can include live performances, sheet music, educational software, or creative activities. Most importantly, when you feel the need to break the mundane routine, mix it up and try a new book. Hey everybody, before we end this episode, I just want to again thank you for joining me here today. I also want to tell you of a change in our blog website. We're doing a redesign, a little bit of a rebranding, and our new website for our blog is bandbuzz.org. And we want to encourage you to visit the site, check it out, subscribe. All the other aspects of the Music Educator will be staying the same, just the actual blog will be changing its name and design. So, thank you again. We hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Please comment, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Music Educator podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Music Educator podcast for the latest tips, tricks, and practical advice you can use tomorrow. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. As always, join in the discussion and let your voice be heard. We will see you on the next episode of the Music Educator podcast. And remember, music can change the world.